for today, I'm excited to highlight some of the activities that the MSCC has had over the last week, specifically our participation in the HBCU week. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to highlight some of our current grant activities, and we're going to talk about that briefly. And then we're going to have an overview of cloud services by one of our very own members, Mr. Bobby Clark. So I'm excited about that. After that, we'll have a closing, and we'll have everybody have an opportunity for questions and discussion. So wanted to highlight our participation in the HBCU week. This was a national event where this was the first time the MSCC was able to participate on an event this level. You see that we have a QR code, and this will link you directly to our presentation. Our presentation was viewed by over 200 participants during the HBCU week activities. And since then, we've had another 130 people watch our presentation. I'm constantly getting questions and responses from the presentation about cyber infrastructure, about the MSCC. So this is a great opportunity for us as we expand to a larger audience. So please feel free to share the QR code, share the presentation. And also, if you have questions about anything in the presentation, please reach out to myself or anyone from the MSCC staff. Some of the highlights for the week is we were able to participate in various sessions that include topics such as economic opportunities, research and innovation. And we also participated in some of the panel, we participated in the presidents and chancellors agenda, where we were able to sit in on some of the meetings with various HBCU presidents and chancellors about topics that were important to them. And this helps the MSCC better frame our discussion points and highlight potential services that we can provide to the HBCU community. So we're excited about that. And again, if there are any questions, please feel free to let me know. And I like feedback on the presentation. I will tell you, for next year, we are looking at having an in-person panel. We have some concepts around that, but I want to hear some feedback from our current participants about topics that you would be interested in, and how we can better participate and maybe even serve you at a national level. While I have the slides up, I also wanted to share a QR code, and I'll send this out to everyone for our MSCC all hands recordings. So if you scan this QR code, it will link you to our YouTube page that has all of our recordings for our MSCC all hands. So I'll leave that up for a minute, and then I'll also send this out to everyone through the distro list. Are there any questions so far? All right. So next, we wanted to highlight a couple things. In the next coming weeks, we have some very exciting information to share for the MSCC. As you all know, that we do have a National Science Foundation Award that enabled the MSCC to start hosting workshops and to engage our community in a more direct level. We have submitted a proposal to the National Science Foundation, and it was, we did receive an award. So we're going to have a more formal discussion about that award and what it means for us moving forward. But the award will start 1 October. So after that, we'll go into more detail on the award and how it will affect the MSCC moving forward. I'm not sure if everyone has received some of our blog posts about the NSF award, but if you're not on that distro, please send me an email. I'll make sure that you get on that distro so you can be up to date on our current activities and some of the things we'll be doing moving forward. All right. So we're ready to turn it over to our very own MSCC CLC member, Mr. Bobby Clark, to talk about cloud services. So Bobby, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lawrence. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and share my screen so you can see the presentation I have. I promise I will not PowerPoint you to death here, but I did want to show you a couple of things about the program and hopefully talk about it in a couple of ways that maybe you haven't thought of. So first of all, I want to give you a kind of a history of where we came from on this. The NET Plus program is certainly part of Internet2, and I play a role in it. But I don't want you to look at it just as a product to be utilized, a set of tools to be utilized. It is, but it also could serve as a model for us for how we might want to do and react within MSCC. So let me get started a little bit. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bobby Clark. I work at Clemson University. I work in the internal operations center of that. I do procurement and vendor management. If you're interested in that kind of thing about what I do, there's my information. I'm also chair of one of the advisory committees that is part of NET Plus and have been so for a couple of years, which is BPLAC, and I'll explain that in a minute. Basically, it's a business procurement, legal, and advisory committee we'll talk about how that fits. But I also have on the call, and he's in a place where you can't do a whole lot of talking, Sean O'Brien, who is the vice president of cloud programs at Internet2. And he and I have been working quite a while on NET Plus, having long-term discussions about how NET Plus works and helps the research and educational community. And maybe there are lessons here to be applied to MSCC. What I want to do today is just give you a quick overview of that historical viewpoint, talk about what the NET Plus program is, what services and programs are available through it, and how we might take advantage of that program and hopefully spare some feedback and give you a chance to ask some questions. So unless there's anybody who has anything else we want to clear up, I think we can move forward. So the first question that I'd like to get out of the way is why research and education community facility cloud services are important. And from that answer, I think you really need to look at the history of Internet2 and how we got here. So this sort of gives you a chart that starts in 1996 and moves up through today that talks about the services that we provide Internet2 and how those services came about. There is a logical thread to be followed on how that Internet2 product started and what we did next, and the next thing we did, and then that leading to NET Plus. First of all, in 1996, the famous airport meeting where several of colleges, research institutions got together and decided that a thing called Internet2 needed to be created. And that Internet2 was certainly about putting together a very high performance backbone service that took patches of fiber that were scattered throughout the nation and maybe even throughout the world and put them together in one package that could provide a high reliable product to provide the kind of thresholds that we expected and needed in research and education. That famous meeting has led to the creation of Internet2 as a 501c3 that you know we see, and then led us a few years later to now we have this high-speed network. How do we identify people on the network? And so identity federation became important, and from that came the Internet2 middleware initiative that talks about chivalrous, which is a way of identifying people as a security protocol, and in common, which talks about certification on it. So how do you identify entities and know the place you went to is where you intended to go? Those two make sense. Yeah, first you have the network, then you want to know who's on it. Then we move to an idea of, well, we need universal connectivity where people can get on this network without having to do much, no matter where they are. And from that, in 2009, came the service Eduroam, which maybe some of you know about. That's a service you deploy on your campus, and it does two things. It lets you have a common service that you can get everybody on your wireless service on your campus, but more importantly, if you go to other campuses or other places that use Eduroam, you open up your network and you're connected there too. So that universal connectivity, the identity federation, and the network itself have led us to this point where in 2010, we decided we needed to talk about applications that live on our service, that use our standards, and how we can influence them to be better partners and better solutions for our community. And so the NET Plus program was born out of the NESBO EDUCAUSE Cloud Summit, and we've begun since 2010 to develop a catalog of products that use all three of those services. So I want to stop for a minute and think about that for a while. The logic that we're moving through this particular one: create a place first, know who we are, make sure we have better access, and then moving toward a catalog that has services that we can use. So again, that certainly talks about what we can do for the Internet and IT community with Net Plus, but I also think there is a lesson to be learned from MSCC on what we need to do as our program grows and learns and becomes more reactive to our members. So that historical viewpoint leads us probably to the description of what the Net Plus Cloud is. So if you think of a catalog, of course, of active subscriptions, we have more than 1,100 that has services built into it from leading cloud vendors, more than 20, more than 110 institutions who are contributing it in the service evaluation, and 25 advisory and working groups with almost 500 or more than 500 institutions subscribing to it. You would be getting a good description of that, but it's more than that. It's global partners in the Internet IT community coming together to influence and track those applications that mean the most to us and give us the most benefit. It also has benefits for people who are non-members. So if you're not a member of Internet2, you can still participate in the Net Plus program and get great benefit from it. And it also informs our industry partners on what kind of solutions they need to provide and how they can provide them to give a better result to our community. So that includes people who are affiliates, so it means that anywhere from the performing arts up to K-12 to libraries and museums who are all using Net Plus applications. So what's the Net Plus program more specifically? We work with industry providers to really work on 6 different optimized points for each of the services that we provide in the cloud. So features and functionality are of course important, but technical integration with other services that we may be using, security and compliance are very important. So a standard, and we evaluate each one of our services on a set of standards that you can rely upon Net Plus applications living up to. Of course, we are very aware of what pricing does for university environments, and so it's geared toward our environment. There are contract terms that we can live with and certainly influence with once we determine that we need to make changes. And deployment is easier because fast deployment was certainly one of the things that we had. I think someone has their sound on. Okay, there you go. So each one of the time we bring a service to Net Plus, we involve a service evaluation team who comes up with and looks at those points and negotiates a product. So more specifically, those service evaluation processes are members of our community. Oh. They're I2 members. I guess someone has still got some noise going on. There are members who come together on committees and evaluate services based on those 6 principles. They then negotiate a group facilitation agreement that we put into our catalog that's made available to our members and non-members so that they can utilize those services better. And then over time, they're maintained and supported by an advisory board and a program manager from I2 who constantly looks at the needs of our community and that service and communicates how those services can better improve and give better outcomes to us. So the idea behind this is community-driven services that are reactive to our needs and also provide us a common platform that we know works. They all should be using Shibboleth. They all use in common. They all utilize our networks. And therefore, when we apply them, you don't have to worry about how you would deploy them as much. You're already familiar with those kinds of services. That's the idea behind this. Okay, so again, I'll pull you out a little bit just to do a bigger picture. For Net Plus, these are the 8 things that we look at when we apply services. Of course, terms and pricing, but also our community. Are they reactive to our community? How fast can they be deployed? How are they vetted so we don't have to worry about whether they're secure or not? We use elements of vendor management to talk to vendors directly, not just about products. And then we also look at the new kinds of things that are approached out there, like accessibility and security, and how they integrate with other services. MSCC could take all of these and use them directly, or they could come up with new ones that might apply more to our membership and solve our members' needs. And so my hope is that this will serve as at least as an example of what MSCC could do for products and development, working with other vendors and services. Just a little bit about the structure of NET Plus and how our members work with it. So think of it as subscribing campuses who use programs and services in the catalog. They give feedback and requests to an community advisory board who gives them regular updates about what those services might do. The service provider provides roadmaps that are communicated to all of those subscribing campuses and also aggregates a community of feedback so that they can improve their product toward the people who use it. And then on top of that is our service advisory boards. The most important one probably is the Program Advisory Board, PEG, that advises the whole program, but there are also ones that talk about each one of the architectures, and there are certain types of ones there. And then of course, there's the committee that I chair, which actually talks about procurement and legal and business opportunities with some of those items and advises NET Plus. So there's a wide scope of community that you could be involved with, even as a non-member, to affect and advocate some of the things that you might want to see in that catalog. Let's talk about what NET Plus is not. It's not a vendor. So the I2 and the NET Plus is not a vendor you're buying from. We're aggregating a catalog that you can look at and choose services from. We're not a buying club. We're not a channel. It's not purely a contract vehicle, because the whole point of it is to involve you in the actual delivery of those services and the feedback on those services. It's not exclusive. We don't pick winners. So in our catalog, you will see competing services that do the same thing, but then you will have the opportunity to choose between them from the catalog. But what is common about that is that they're using the same Internet2 protocols and standards that we have developed since 1996. We are a member-driven way for your community to act on its own behalf, to gather input, influences, and directions from the cloud service deployment, and to have a select portfolio of services that complete a user-led service evaluation process and go through a negotiated contract. That's what NET Plus provides you. So there are available cloud services and programs out there, and let's talk about a few of them. Some of them you will recognize pretty instantly. So we have things from AWS all the way to Zoom. We talk about products that manage passwords, things that manage your files and do two-factor authentication like Dual, and a number of products that you can look at. And the very least, you can use that set of products to identify services you may not know of and learn more about. Or even if you do know them and you're about to purchase them, maybe you'll understand why the pricing that we have available and maybe be able to leverage some of that. So it's a very valuable tool that we've used at Clemson, and I certainly think it would be valuable to you in whatever pursuit you have. If your institution is pursuing a research goal to become an R2 and R1, this is absolutely a place where you can find applications that will help you move along in that goal. But again, looking at this from the MSCC point of view, we may have things that we want to look at and navigate. And I certainly think there are opportunities to work with NET Plus to leverage their catalog, but maybe there are things we want to do on our own. And so obviously we want to make this an example to you guys to look at and determine how we can use it best to advance MSCC's needs. We have a couple of services I wanted to highlight that I think they're pretty important. Again, available to you, whether you're a member or not. The Internet2 Cloud Scorecard is a way that we evaluated services that are in our catalog and not in our catalog to decide what they can do and how they might fit in some of our standards. You can access that to going to that link that's listed there, and you can see what the scorecard is for some of the services who have completed it. That might help you in your evaluation of services you're looking at, and also give you some ideas of the services that are available out there. So I certainly think that's an important service to look at. If you're looking for cloud learning and skills opportunities, then there is actually another product called Class that was developed in 2020 that has a sort of a collaboration with some of our providers to provide training and support services for workforce development by gathering or curating a collection of training materials that may help you as you deploy or evaluate some of those systems. So please take advantage of that, because that is a great opportunity for you to help your staff, your institution, support and train others who may be using these services. Lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about how you have opportunities to engage with NET Plus that are available to you today. And we certainly want to listen to other ways that you may want to engage with us in the future. So even if you are not a member, you can sign up for an I2 online virtual event anytime you want. Those are often held with our community, and that's open to the large research and educational community. You can volunteer for a service evaluation as we're bringing up new services and starting service evaluations. That's open to members and non-members who might be interested in services that we're getting ready to deploy, and you can get into the weeds about how those services work, how they are deployed in the NET Plus catalog, and hope to maybe negotiate a federating agreement that we use in the future. You can join a working group that also talks about a service that's already deployed and how it's working and how it can better improve. You can certainly join one of the service advisory boards, that one of which I chair, but there are 2 others that will give advice on how NET Plus can deploy services better. And you can also just go to our catalog and look at our pricing and our contracts, but you also hopefully will stay for the community. So that ends my slides. I told you I wasn't going to do it too long. Here's some more information that you can certainly write down. Certainly the first one is the catalog itself, which is here. But there's also ways for you to contact the NET Plus group to ask any questions or reach out to us, and we certainly hope you do that. And at that point, I'm open to answering questions. I think Sean is on the line with me, so he'll probably help me out with some of the things I don't know. But I hope this has given you a good opportunity, and I hope I didn't overspend the time.
So I do have a question, if it's okay. So if you're not a procurement, so if one wants to procure through NET Plus, a product that has been vetted by NET Plus, let's just say Zoom, how does that happen? Do we go through I2? If we're not a member, what do we do? If we are a member, what do we do? So I don't understand the logistics of that, because there are products that are there that we have, but I don't think we've used NET Plus or this opportunity. So yeah, just.
So I know Sean is going to jump in a minute, but here's what I'll tell you is the quick answer to that, Leah. So the catalog, this catalog here, will let you see the products that we have on available to you, and there's pricing there for members and non-members.
Okay.
So you can use that pricing no matter what where you are in your decision-making process with I2 and NET Plus, and you can get to those products. Some of those products have very well negotiated contracts and terms that may be appealing to you, even if you already have contracts with those vendors. And you can certainly say to the vendor, hey, I'd like to use the NET Plus contract. And you can certainly make available to that. I know that there are different rules for different states. I'm involved with South Carolina, so I know South Carolina's rules, which say that of a certain type and price, if you're under 10,000, you don't have to do anything formal in South Carolina, but you have to if it's more than that. But many of the products and services we're talking about are less than that. And so if you want to tip your toe into this and try one of those services, most places have the ability to say, I want to buy it at this contract, and there not be any procurement obstacles in your way for doing that. But we can talk about very specific ones if you need to, but there are lots of services here that are available to you that you can at least look at what the pricing is, something like CrashPlan or something like Canvas or DocuSign. You can look and see what that is, and maybe you want to participate just a little bit, and you can do that with very little friction. Does that help?
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Sean, you want to add to that?
And Bobby, I'll
just that I do.
I think you described it perfectly. And you actually do, the university acquisition side of that for a living. So you know what that looks like maybe better than I do from where I sit. But one thing I'll just add is if you email us at that email, netplus@internet2.edu, we're happy to share with you the pricing. We're also happy to share with you something we put together and something that the committee that Bobby is on and chairs has helped us refine, which is called the Procurement Analysis Worksheet, where we actually go through in detail what was negotiated in the Net Plus contract vis-a-vis what's available either in a commercial contract or a higher ed contract if that vendor has a specific higher ed contract. So, you know, when you're doing an analysis, you want to look at things of like, all right, what's my liability cap of a data breach? What's going to be indemnification if there is a data breach? Is it going to cover my reporting costs and things like that? So we detail out in the procurement analysis worksheet, just as an example, you know, those things we've negotiated, and we'll make those available upon request to anyone who's eligible for the agreement.
Bobby, this is Damien. Could you go back to the slide with the page with the services, the website? I think it was.
Do you mean the service catalog itself?
Yeah. So just to be clear on Leah's question, whether I'm a member or not, could you go up a bit? Like Duo Security or anyone, Cloud Connect. In fact, no, let's do Crash Plan. I don't know what that is, but let's do Crash Plan.
Crash Plan is a workstation backup service. So let's say.
Right, yeah. So whether I'm a member or not, the way I would procure this is I would go directly to Crash Plan and say, I am a member and I want the Net2 contract, or I'm not a member, but I still want the Net2. I don't have to come to Internet2 at all.
If there is non-member pricing for Crash Plan and member pricing for Crash Plan. So you could reach out to Nick Lewis, who's over Crash Plan, to see what subscriber information is.
Right.
You can learn more about the features on what it is and what it does.
Right. So in other words, I don't have to go through Internet2. I can deal directly with this company as my institution directly with the company and just state that I want the Net Plus contractual terms. Is that correct?
That's right.
You
don't have to come through Internet2 for any of the services on that slide 17. For the majority of those services, there is, you know, member pricing and non-member pricing. The member pricing is a little bit better. For some, there's a third caveat of member pricing, non-member pricing, and connected non-member pricing. But either way, yes, you can go to the vendor and ask for the Net Plus contract. I would, if you're the scenario that was being described before, say for Zoom, if you're an existing Zoom subscriber, I would encourage you to email us first, that netplus@internet2.edu email address, because what we found for a number of these services is if you reach out to your account exec and the Net Plus pricing is lower, you will get some sort of answer that looks like obfuscation, because, you know, they don't want to reduce the annual recurring revenue on your service. So, you know, we can tell you what the pricing is. So you're armed with that, you know, the pricing and any contract terms difference. So you're armed with that going into a conversation with your account exec. But you do not need to come to us. But hopefully by coming to us, we could provide you some value add going into that conversation.
Okay, thank you. So I know this presentation is not on membership and non-membership, but could you speak to the cost of membership?
When we say membership, whether you're an I2 member or not.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if I can pull down all the specifics of that, and an I2 membership is really dependent on where you are and who you're connected to that. So it's dependent on how big a school you are and what services you are. But certainly you could join I2, and those I2 members get a lower price. There are places where regional providers provide secondary membership to I2. You still can get the member price, but you may have a different view of what membership is. So if you wouldn't mind, Damien, let's have a separate discussion of what I2 membership is, because it's a little out of scope from here.
Yeah.
Bobby, this is Brian Fisk. Does the price, does it vary from state to state, or are there any prereqs before joining and using this service, depending on the state
This catalog is available to anyone in the nation who who an educational institution who fits the criteria of a non-member, then that includes you. So
Okay.
if you wanted to look at this, this doesn't change from South Carolina to North Carolina. It is a contract for all of Internet2. What I would tell you is your state probably has rules that apply to you in some way. Maybe if you're private, they don't apply to you. If you're public, they very much apply to you. And you want to make sure you're following those rules and then how that works.
Okay, thanks.
This is Anna Hunsinger. I can address a little bit about the membership component if you want me to.
Thank you, Anna.
Yes, so today the current membership model that Internet2 operates for higher education members is based on scale factors, the two factors that come into play so that we can determine what an institution will pay in sustaining contributions, which is what we call the combination of membership dues, and a component that also assumes a network participation fee. What each institution would pay is based on an equation that we use that takes into account capital expenditures against also research expenditures for that institution. Normally, that will determine the price for each school. What we have in the current model is a maximum cap, meaning that those that have the most research expenditures and capital expenditures, at some point we cap them with a maximum threshold. And those on the other end of the spectrum, we have a minimum cap also. The minimum cap currently, roughly, don't quote me on the exact number, comes to about a little bit close to $12,000. And that's currently the least amount under the current model. Let's see, I am very interested as we continue to assess what makes sense for many schools that have not today been able to, or for whatever reason, chosen to be, or the different challenges that they may have in joining Internet2 as members, particularly for the MSCC schools. We're very interested in getting your feedback on how we may evolve our own membership so that we are not, with your needs in mind, we are not constraining just based on scale factors that I just mentioned. So I'd be very happy to talk to anybody, through the MSCC leadership. Is certainly something that we're trying to discuss so that the barriers to entry into membership are less so into the future.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, you can contact me. I'll put my contact information and I can make sure that the community engagement team that tackles the membership pieces can also address any questions that you have.
Did anyone else have any questions, things I can answer? I'm very curious to know what your feedback is. Does this seem helpful? Does this seem something like a tool you have maybe you've heard about but not really understood?
Bobby, there's a question in the chat.
Oh, so go ahead.
I don't know why he don't speak up, Mr. Richard Maxwell.
So the question is, can you read it, Bobby?
Yeah, I'm just catching it. So are all of the vendors already vetted or have some valid contract cooperative purchasing agreements such as the, okay. So yes, any active user in the Net Plus program has a facilitating agreement available for how it's deployed and what that feature set is and the terms that are available on that contract. Now, those facilitating agreements are negotiated by the service production groups that we talked about. And so they are not, I don't know if you're actually referring to NESPO kinds of different contracts, but they are different than that. Those agreements stand on their own under the Net Plus program.
So I think this question, I know this person, this is from Alabama. So these are the cooperative agreements that an Alabama state entity or Alabama state school could use to purchase something. So I think what he's asking is, Are these vendors specifically vetted against these specific cooperative agreements that Alabama entities could buy or
I
approve
think
to buy from?
the simple answer to that is no.
Okay.
They are vetted under the principles we talked about, those 6 principles, by IT community members serving on one of those service committees. For South Carolina, we use the Net Plus program at times, in addition to something we call the 80-20 rule, the 10% rule, that if we find a price, even it's in a state contract or another contracting vehicle, and it's lower than what we have the ability to go to that vendor and say, please match. And if they can't match, we can use the contract. You may have similar kinds of things in your state. So we use it as a tool for that. We also just straight out use, and when it's valuable, when we're under $10,000, we just use the contract price that's given to us because those terms we know are negotiated in our favor.
So Richard, I think it would be beneficial to reach out to the procurement department. I'm not sure who's there now, and find out if Alabama has that 10% rule, because I know for sure South Carolina is much more stringent than Alabama. So Alabama may very well have that rule as well.
And sorry for being muted earlier. I was multitasking as usual. Yeah, and what Damien had kind of brought up earlier was we do have, state bid laws that have limitations that if a service exceeds $15,000, we have to do a competitive, I guess, RFP type process for those services. And so
we have a similar set of rules too, Richard.
Yeah, and so there's additional ones that are specific to Alabama, but these are more of a national level, like the GSA. That's what I was asking: are these vetted on the national level and kind of remove those barriers to entry for individual states that will have differences in the way that's handled?
So the 2 things I want to mention to you there is, yes, the contracts we're looking at, I'm looking at right now. I think this is the Zoom one. That's as a national scope. So those pricing are there, but what Net Plus is not is just a place for you to do contracting. Understand that contract has been developed with a community behind it, who has looked at standards and outcomes that make sense for education. Right. And so there are lots of those places that I think some of them, I recognize NASPO in there, that have a more commodity view of what those services are, and not necessarily what educational institutions need. So for my view, many of the Net Plus contracts serve as great examples of how you deploy those systems on our campuses.
Okay.
Bobby, I'll maybe add to that just quickly. Sure. So, we as Net Plus and as the universities that work on the contracts, we typically do not, there are some exceptions, we typically do not put out an RFP or an RFI or otherwise competitive bid the contract. The genesis of how a Net Plus contract is usually created is there is a challenge that the community wants to solve with a specific vendor. So I'll give you a very recent example of Google Workspace. So Google has decided to move away from their free edition. They've decided to move away from unlimited storage. That's really impactful for universities. So, in that case, we have already identified the vendor. Our preference on the Net Plus contracts is always to have a direct contract and not to use a distributor or reseller, so that there's very clear legal privity. There's very clear lines of responsibility, very clear lines of who you're contracting with. So, in that case, the case I'm talking about, we specifically worked with Google on 2 things. One, a business model that extends out free licensing, that extends out unlimited storage, and then a ramped pricing model, because it's really impactful to all of a sudden have to start paying for something you haven't paid for 10 years. And then also negotiating on specific contract terms. Now for GWE, they have a lot of those higher ed terms in place already, whether it's FERPA, whether it's governing law, things like that. But when you get into things like data remediation or breach notification costs, or one of the things we spent a lot of time negotiating on liability for the university for acts of students, acts of employees, and acts of employees outside of the scope of their employment. For a service like Google Workspace, you can imagine employees are using that service outside of the scope of their employment. Do you put personal things in Google Drive? I imagine some people do, and the university as an entity doesn't want to be liable for that. So we spent a lot of time on the T's and C's, a lot of time on the business model, and a lot of time on the technical review. But we don't, in using all that time, we then don't spend time on the RFP process. There are many institutions who do, issue their own RFPs for services and then award to the Net Plus contract. And we've been encouraging them to put cooperative procurement language in those contracts. So, that's another avenue. I know for Google Cloud Platform, a number of institutions have used Michigan State's RFP that they awarded to the Net Plus contract as an example, because they wrote it as, any public agency can use that agreement. So hopefully that doesn't provide more confusion and actually provides more clarity, but that's a little bit of how we work.
So if I was to just to have some follow-up questions to your point, here's the 2 or 3 products that we want to learn more about. Some of them we do have, some of them we don't have. Can we get on the phone and just talk through what's available, how the decisions were made around those products? Then we could have that conversation. Oh, great. Okay, great. Because I think that
Yep, absolutely.
To your point, each state and each institution's procurement rules are going to be different, and they're for us to say, okay, for North Carolina, here's what we have to do, and here's our level of delegation, and then you can say this is the best route because you may have all that information somewhere behind the scenes for that particular product.
Leah,
that's absolutely, and that's part of the
Right.
reasoning behind why we've been reticent to do an RFP is there really are different standards in different states and different standards for different institutions within different states. I came working from Virginia, where like each college and university in Virginia has a different level of delegated authority from the state. Some basically get to act like private corporations. Some have to use what the state says, period, full stop. So, not having, national standards around a lot of these things here in the United States, we've sort of, and the fact that Internet2 is a technology organization, we've really focused mostly on, technical work and, legal and contracting and business model work, and not the procurement process.
Leah, does that give you what you needed? What I also want to point out to you in that particular case that Sean's talking about was the fact that there was an advocacy in what Net Plus and the Net Plus group gave us when that first came out from Google. Their application to was, here it is, you're done. And there were 70 schools, let's say 70 subscribers right now. I'm sure there were a lot more that acted through Net Plus to say, whoa. You need to listen to us, and how are you doing this? Please deploy this in a way that makes more sense to us. And they listened. That's the kind of advocacy through community that you can't really get when you do it by yourself. So having this kind of community that reacts in ways that makes it easier for all of our institutions to deploy these services is in our best interests. That's certainly what I've seen over the last few years, and that deploying cloud services has become more and more complicated. So you want to do this in a way where you take advantage of community, where you learn from other people's deployment, that your voice is added to the many voices out there, so that the Googles and the Apples and the Microsofts of the world pay attention. And so that's why I think this is an important move for any institution to be involved with. And that goes for Net Plus and also for MSCC and how we develop our advocacy goals.
Are there any questions?
I'll put back that information slide so everybody can see it.
So Bobby, I do want to say thank you very much. And Sean, thank you for taking the time. I know you're busy, but I thought this was important. The MSCC, I think of the MSCC as a collaborative organization, right? Where we can come together and do things that we would not be able to do on our own, whether that's as a CIO or an institution. The Net Plus example that was given today really highlights that. And by participating in the MSCC, if there is another cloud deployment, like Bobby was mentioning, that is complicated, that is difficult to deploy for whatever reason, we would like to hear that information. And perhaps there's something that we as a collective, like the examples that Bobby gave and Sean highlighted, can come to a consensus with that vendor on a way that would be beneficial to not only us as a community, but maybe other schools, other institutions. So I thought it was important to just really highlight these services. And again, it's not about necessarily joining Net Plus, but these are other opportunities that are available to you through participating in MSCC. It's very important that if you have questions on anything that was covered, please, please, please reach out. We're going to send these slides out, and feel free to ask the questions. We're here to help. We're here to expand and do what we can to help everyone. Are there any additional questions? I think it's important that we open it up because I know it was a lot of information. And I think Bobby did a great job summarizing it. And I know there's differences between each state, and we're willing to help. If you have a specific question, we can get down in the weeds. We just didn't want to do that, by state on this call, but we're more than happy to get specific answers for you if there's a need.
This is not so much a question as is just a observation. For example, I'm looking at Splunk because I'm needing to look at some SIM functionality here on campus. And I do see where in this description you list Carasoft as a VAR for this platform. Is there a way that we could have this catalog searchable by the VAR? Because we already know and identify certain VARs that are on these contract vehicles that would eliminate a lot of the confusion about how to open up a pathway to procurement. Carasoft, SHI, some of these other VARs like that. If we could search by VAR, then we could look for platforms that are already covered.
I think that's an idea we could certainly take back to and see what we're looking at. Sean, I don't know if you have anything to comment on that, but sounds like a really good idea.
Yeah, there's a number of outstanding requests, and many of them are really good ones, like this one about how to make the service catalog more useful for folks who are using it. So yes, that's a good suggestion, and I will add that to my list of things we're looking at. Yeah, and it's not just it's not just Carasoft, right, as a distributor. It's also what resellers are enabled. And for some of them, like for Palo Alto, I think there's 50 different resellers that can sell the Net Plus contract in that case. So yeah, that does open up a lot of options.
Thank you for the idea.
For those of you who don't know Richard, he is the CISO at Alabama A&M University in Huntsville, Alabama. He taught me everything I needed to know.
I thought I taught you everything you needed to know. Oh, wow.
The other things you taught me.
No, thank you for the feedback. This is exactly what we want to hear. And honestly, there are ways that if you're very interested in being involved in this, you can have a voice in this. Please reach out to me and let me know. And there are obviously some ways that we're talking about some other topics that may be of interest to you.
So I'll say this, I'm receiving a lot of direct messages in the chat. We will send the slide deck. We will, if there are specific questions on Net Plus, I would direct you to that slide there for the more information, but we will get you to the right people to answer your question. Again, we are a collaborative organization. We're here to help. And I think this is just one of the ways that we can provide a vehicle for hopefully things to be easier when it comes to addressing some challenges when it comes to cloud services or determine what services fit your institution. Want to highlight one thing. it was put in the chat that it would be good for me to remind everyone about the CI Compass's Student Fellowship Program is accepting applications from now until October 17th. There's a link in the chat. I will also add another slide for some of the other links that were put in the chat. So I will also send all of that out right after this meeting. I also put in the chat links to our Internet2 page that has a couple resources, blogs on activities that the MSCC is doing. I've been asked about that. And also a link to some of the highlights for the MSCC over the last couple months. So I will link that. And also just remember that all of our meetings are recorded. Once you have that link to that YouTube, you can save that link and we upload it as soon as the meeting is over. We do a little video editing to make sure that it's professional as possible, but you will have that as well. Are there any additional questions before we close the meeting?
And I just threw our contact information into the chat as well.
All right. I think this was a great meeting overall. Always looking for feedback. Look forward to seeing everyone next month, and feel free to continue to reach out to me. You will have that information. Everyone stay safe. I know we talked about the storm earlier, but my prayers are with everyone. And if there's anything we can do to help with any of these questions or anything when it comes to, making our campuses have more accessible cyber infrastructure, please let me know. All right. Thank you.